until about 12:15 we end.
Okay, because I'm a sport manager orientation, so.
Chelsey Thul. We're going to do the Tucker table today on a project that we've been working on that seems like 10 years long already, but we'll get to share some of the things that we've been thinking about, talking about. And so this is pretty interactive, so if you have questions as we go, feel free to shoot your hand up and we can do that. And we've left plenty of time for questions, so we can also have some discussion at the end. This is really kind of phase one of a very long project, which Chelsey could talk about in a little bit. But what I think I want to do is set the stage for why this project, because over the last couple years and specifically in the last 6 months, we've been getting a lot of questions about why East African girls? Why did you do this project? Why are 2 white women from Minnesota researching East African girls? Which is a valid question. So I want to give you a little history about how we got to this project. So as a lot of you know, with the Tucker report that we finished at the end of '07, a lot of the thinking that I did when we were finishing up that report, we were just talking about girls in general. And we didn't have a lot of space to talk specifically about underserved girls, girls of color, immigrant girls, rural girls, girls that typically aren't served with physical activity and sport. So we got thinking about that as kind of a next phase of the Tucker Center report. And lo and behold, along Team Up for Youth calls us and says, oh, will you write a paper on underserved girls and sport? And we said, sure, we've been thinking about that anyway. So Chelsey and I finished that paper up this fall, and that will be coming out this spring in conjunction with Team Up for Youth out in San Francisco. So along that lines, what we learned about with the Tucker report was we know that girls are less active than boys. We know that girls of color, immigrant girls, girls of low SES are the least active population, which leads them to be at risk for health implications, and they fail to accrue developmental benefits. So I know a lot of you guys know this already, but one thing that really popped out for me with this report was that we so often ask the girls, what do you want to do? What do you like? We assume that we know what's best for them, and then we design programs for them that often don't work, and especially for a very specific population of immigrant girls here in our community, which is the largest Somali and East African community in the country. One thing that I was thinking about is how can we use the Tucker Center report to really make a difference in the lives of girls in our own community? So this got us thinking, and Chelsey and I wrote a grant to the Milpomene Institute for Women's Health Research, which led to this pilot project that we'll talk to you about today, which is now kind of growing into a very large research project for us. So what we'll do is share with you some of that information today. So really the purpose of this project was to ask East African girls about their values and beliefs and preferences for physical activity and what that meant to them in their own lives. So as with any research project, with a great idea, then comes the hard work. So with a very capable and ambitious and intelligent graduate student to carry out the work, it becomes a reality. So I'm going to turn it over to Chelsey, and she'll talk to you a little bit more about the design and some of the research questions.
All right, so consistent with the purpose of our study, then we asked for research questions about the perceptions of East African girls' culturally relevant physical activities, their barriers to and facilitators of physical activity, as well as their suggestions for culturally relevant physical activity programming. And to do this, as Dr. LaVoi indicated, little to no research has been conducted with this population. We use an exploratory action research design to guide our data collection, and more specifically, we used a narrative qualitative approach. Consistent with this approach, Cresswell states that when you're really interested in hearing the stories of girls or stories of people, this is the approach to use. So that's why we use this. To listen to the girls' stories, then, we conducted semi-structured interviews in field settings, both focus group and one-on-one field settings. with 19 East African girls, and the girls ranged in age from 12 to 18, with the majority of girls right around 15 years of age. And it is important to note that all of the girls in our study were practicing Muslims, and the majority of girls were second-generation immigrants as well. In terms of the data analysis, and so we do all these interviews, and it results in tons and tons of data, 116 single-space pages of data to be exact. So we analyzed that using Axel open coding, where we looked through the data, found all these raw quotes, combined those to form the basis of lower order themes, combined lower order themes that were similar to come up with the basis of higher order themes, and deemed our data collection complete when no further higher order themes could be made. I do want to note too that through this type of data analysis, we used investigator triangulation, so we had multiple coders, and we also used a peer debriefing method to manage biases, which are important when you're working with qualitative data.
Can you define, sorry to interrupt, but can you define East African, like in terms of, does it have to be from a certain country, or like?
Great question. So for our study, we were looking at Somalia, Eritrea, Ethiopian region, and all of the girls in our study were either Somali or Ethiopian. It was a pretty equal split of both Somali and Ethiopian. And we tried as much as we could to keep the groups homogenous, because we know that between Somali women and Ethiopian women, there can be some different values shared. That wasn't always the case, but we tried our best to do that as well.
And is there a particular religion that's usually?
Yeah, it's particularly
Muslim.
Yeah, particularly Muslim, and all of these girls were practicing Muslims. Yep. Awesome. Thanks. Any other questions? Okay. All right. So we do all this research, which leads me to Dr. LaVoi coming up with the.
Okay, so our first research question, we really wanted to know from the girls, what are you doing? What do you like to do? What would you prefer to do if you were given the opportunity? So what we did is we used this graph to talk to the girls. It was a visual graph that Chelsey sat down with them and said, okay, you know, on this graph, what are some things that you do, and what would you like to do? And it was a visual representation, because we weren't really sure if we just gave them this graphic, which is one we took out of the Tucker report, if they would come up with a wide range of activities. So we wanted to prompt them a little bit, because when we say fitness or sports, that might mean different things to them that we wouldn't have thought of. So what came out of the first research question were some pretty clear patterns. One is that they really, every single girl talked about swimming. They wanted to swim, they liked to swim, which was really interesting to us, given the fact of their cultural and religious traditions around covering the body and privacy and modesty. So this really kind of caught us off guard, but the more we thought about it and listened to their voices and read the transcripts, this came out because they thought it was liberating. They could strip off their clothes, they could be with all females, and they could just swim. So I want to read you a quote from one girl because it's particularly telling. She says, "I like swimming because it's comfortable and you can wear whatever you want," she says loudly and with lots of excitement. "And you can swim like by yourself, you know. You don't have to worry about anyone looking at you. I don't care. I'm going to swim. I'm going to wear a swimsuit and I'm going to let my hair down." So there was this real sense of freedom and liberation from swimming. A couple other things that came out were dance. Cultural dance, any other kinds of dance. The girls just like to do that, whether they did it in their homes or in a cultural space. And fitness activities, but what did not come out was preference of organized sport. They wanted structure, which I'll talk about later, but they never talked about organized sport as we kind of see it in terms of organized youth sport. So that was pretty telling to us. So really they wanted to do a lot of activities, they were open activities, but they oftentimes didn't have the opportunity to do the things that they wanted to do. So we'll flesh that out a little bit more as we go.
Which leads me to the barriers the girls discussed regarding physical activity. And the girls we talked to came up with a wide range of barriers. And interestingly enough, as we were really thinking about the themes of our barriers and how they kind of came together, they fit very nicely into for those of you who know the model, Bronfenbrenner's ecological model. It talks about personal, social, structural, cultural barriers. And so we came up with this way to sort of depict that model that we thought really worked with the data. And so I'll talk a little bit more specifically now about each of these overarching barriers. In terms of personal barriers, the girls equally cited a lack of time and feelings of incompetence as barriers to their participation. To describe the lack of time, one girl said, "Mostly all of us, like girls in our religion, we can't have fun time. We have to stay at home to cook, clean. Basically, technically, we don't have time. We're basically like mothers because our parents work. In our culture, we barely have time for it. And we have to help the children do their homework and all of that kind of stuff." So clearly from that quote, this girl really echoed this lack of time. In addition then, to discuss the feelings of incompetence, another girl noted, "Like the girls, we're not used to playing. We don't know how, so some don't like it, you know." And we feel that this feelings of incompetence is a particularly important barrier to pay attention to because we know from sports psychology research that feelings of perceived physical competence relate to participation and particularly continued participation in physical activity. So the fact that the majority of these girls are noting feelings of incompetence is something that we really need to pay attention to. All right, moving forward then, social barriers. The social barriers really fell into two camps. One is peer barriers and the other is family barriers. And the main peer barrier that was discussed were peer gender stereotypes, and the girls really talked strongly about this barrier. For instance, one girl highlights, "We want to play, but boys say, like, we girls are kind of weak. So they play hard and think we can't play hard, you know. The boys are saying that, and it's our culture, you know. The boys have to play on their side, and the girls have to play on their side." So it's a really strong barrier echoed throughout my conversations with the girls, which is in line with other research, maybe a little bit more strongly, though. In regard to the family barriers, then, girls noted a lack of family support and family approval as primary deterrents to their activity. One girl notes, most parents, they would say no to their girls being active because they just don't feel comfortable with their girls being outside or staying after school. They believe their girls are supposed to be home to take care of the family. They think their girls might do something bad. So this, too, we see as a particularly troubling barrier because, again, from sports psychology literature, we know that parents in particular are really important social agents in helping and encouraging their girls and boys, but especially girls, to be physically active. So the fact that this support's lacking really comes into play with these low physical activity levels, so something to really pay attention to as well. In addition to the social barriers, the girls discussed an array of structural and environmental barriers. And the main barrier here, I wish I could tell you about all of them. Because this time I'll talk about the main one. The main one is a lack of space in their communities for these girls. And particularly the girls discuss a lack of space due to boys taking up the space that's available. And one girl really gets this message, has this message very clearly when she states, "The boys, they like to take all of the place, you know. Like they say, we are the boys, we like doing this, you know, and just take it. I don't know, they just like taking all of the place, especially in our community. The whole place. And we have like a big field, you know, and they play on the whole thing. They have the big boys and the small boys, they have groups to take over the whole place." So clearly space is an issue here. And again, this aligns for the most part with sports psychology literature that indicates that especially in communities where there's limited space, boys do tend to take up the majority of that. And last but certainly not least, cultural barriers came out very strongly with these girls. And we think that these barriers could be particularly unique to this population as well as generally unique to practicing Muslims as well. And the main barrier cited here was maintenance of privacy in public, privacy and modesty in public. And one girl noted this when she says, "I mean, we all want to do these sports, but then there's another situation. I mean, there's boys right there, and we can't really play as good as we want to play. Because when we're around boys, our religion says that we can't take off our clothes. Like right now, like we're wearing our hijabs. Sometimes all you want to do is take them off because it's hot, but you can't. All the boys are right there and you have to wear them." So clearly the maintenance of privacy in this case really affected this girl's ability to be physically active. So those are some of the overarching barriers that we saw and came through time and time again. This leads me into the next piece, and that is that it wasn't all about barriers. It wasn't all bad. There was some good that the girls talked about, which is really important to note. And while the majority of girls talked about barriers and spent a lot of time talking about barriers, it's still equally important to note the facilitators of their activity and what helps them be active, so we can glean that and also help form programs based on some of these elements. And the girls really discussed 3 categories of facilitators to their activity, one being personal value, the other being family, and the third being the environment. And in regard to personal value, the girls talked about both fun and health as important aids to their participation. The girls really discussed that having fun doing physical activity really helped them be active. So, for instance, one girl highlights this so simply, but so great, I think. I play soccer because it's so fun. It's as simple as that. If it's fun, I play. I like it because it's fun. In addition, then, in terms of health, girls really talked about maintaining health. The fact that they value maintaining health helped them be physically active. So another girl indicated, I do activity because of just to be healthy. So just being healthy, that's why she does it. And I think it's really important to know that these personal values strongly fall in line with sports psychology literature, in that the more girls value physical activity, whether it's because it's fun or because they want to maintain their health, the more likely they are to engage in that behavior, so to engage in physical activity. And it's also really interesting to note that both fun and health are intrinsic motives to physical activity participation. We know from the literature that intrinsic motivation are key to sustaining participation, well-being, and satisfaction of physical activity. So it's a great sign that we had girls talking about this. Again, this was a minority of girls, but still something positive we can glean from this and hope to foster along the way with girls in creating programming. Moving forward from personal values, the girls really talked about 2 aspects of family that aided their participation. The girls talked about family support or approval and togetherness. So this is somewhat interesting, right? We just talked about a barrier being family support, and this is what the majority of girls talked about. But we did have a few girls indicate that they did have family approval and support, and that when they had that, it really helped them to be active. One girl notes this when she says, my dad likes that I play soccer. He wants me to play, so that helps me play. So having the support of her family really helps her be active. In addition, then, the girls talk about family togetherness, so doing physical activity with family members aided in getting them to be active. A girl discussed, like when I walk with my mom, it's not hard because we do it together. And she went on to talk about the fact that they do it together really helped her get out there, and pretty consistently this girl talked about this. So, as I mentioned a moment ago, we know family is very important, and it's very encouraging. We have some girls talking about the fact that they have family support, right? But the reality is that family support is still a major barrier for the majority of girls. So something that we still really need to pay attention to, but can glean the positive here with the few girls I've discussed. And then,
let me jump in there for a second too, is that when we're talking to the community, one thing that comes out in terms of increasing parental approval is to appeal to the parents' value of the girls' health. So I think as we move forward, we've talked a lot about one way to get parental approvals is to educate the parents that this isn't just some fun thing that the girls get to, run around and just be with themselves, but it actually improves their health. And this is I think it's going to be an interesting tool for us moving forward, because there's a lot of concern in the East African community that the health of the girls and women is deteriorating because of change in lifestyle. So.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. All right. In terms of environment, then, the girls discussed one major facilitator, and that is geography. According to the girls that we talked to, and this was the majority of girls that we talked to, having a gym or an available space that's close to where they live made it easier for them to be physically active. For instance, one girl really echoed this when she said, because the gym is close to my house, I can be active. So it was as simple as that for her. If the gym's there, I can do it. This also aligns with previous research in that if a safe space and facilities, especially quality facilities, are made available to youth and adolescents, and especially girls because of safety issues, both personal and perceived familial, that is close to home, they're more likely to engage in activity. And so we really see this too as a really important piece, because due to other barriers, girls talked about like money and transportation and a variety of other issues, these safe spaces that are close to home are really important for the girls to be active. And I know Dr. LaVoi will talk about that a little more. But it was nice to hear the girls talk about the fact that they would like to be active if the spaces were there.
Okay, so the last question that we asked them were, well, okay, given the barriers, given the things that are facilitated, given what you like to do, tell us about how we can help you become more physically active. And as Chelsea's going through these quotes and I'm, listening to them and thinking about the data, every time we present this, I'm thinking about it in a little bit different way, which is good because I want you guys to help us think through this too. But one of the great things about this method is we didn't really have any a priori hypotheses. We went in just saying we know nothing about these girls. We want their voices to inform us, and that be the starting point. So as some of you are sitting there thinking and listening to the girls' quotes, it's like, well, this maps on to, Eccles' model, or this maps on to the positive youth development literature, this goes into achievement goals. And so the girls don't know these frameworks, but they tell us what we already know. And so we can use what we know to then help design things that might work for them in ways that are meaningful. So in terms of strategies, 3 major things came out that will really complement what Chelsea's already talked about. So the first one is this idea that it should be female only. And that's a huge theme, obviously because of cultural and religious traditions. And the girls aren't discriminatory. They don't care what females are there. It just should be all females. So they have some pretty funny quotes about this. One girl says, well, they can be any religion they want to be, or any color. It doesn't matter to us as long as they're women. And then another girl says, well, all women only, every age, like even 100. If they're 100 years old, they can still come. So they don't care, little girls, big girls, old girls, just as long as it's all women. So that was really fun for us to hear. Now, along with the all-female idea, it quickly dovetails into why this is important for them in terms of safety. And it's not just physical safety, but psychological safety as well. And one of the things that came up, obviously, was privacy. So the girls wanted a safe space where they can be free, they can have some autonomy, they can build positive social relationships, they can have some liberating space. And one girl says, the number one thing we need is privacy, a space for all girls, like a locker room, to put our stuff in, where we can feel comfortable, where we can just take off anything we want to, run around butt naked. I remember my old school when we had swimming, and it was just the girls. Even the teachers were just girls. It was just all girls. No guys could come in, and they would lock all the doors, and we would just play around and have fun. So I love that quote because it's, again, you get this sense of, once those doors are closed and it's all women, they're just going to let loose. And isn't that great for them to be physically active, but also get other needs met in terms of relationships and social belongingness. So that was another really key theme for the girls. The third one is around coaches. And this one, given a lot of the other work that I do around training coaches, really stuck out to me. And there's some heartbreaking quotes from the girls about coaches that are not culturally sensitive and don't care about the girls. So let me share with you one of those. One of the girls says, we need good coaches that are here every single day that actually want to coach us and that also understand our culture. Coaches are either scared of us or they don't care. There's some coaches that come in and they're here for a couple weeks and then they're gone. And it's we have other coaches that come from the boys' teams and they don't even want to coach us. Sometimes the coaches, they get tired of us because of our culture, because of the way we play, because we can't take off our hijab. So they're just like, this is so stupid, you're not even trying. And then they start yelling at us, and then the next thing you know, they're like, we don't want to coach these stupid, annoying girls. And then the next day we leave, and we come back, and we have a new coach. Not anyone who really wants to be there. So the girls talked a lot about coaches and a lack of trained coaches that are not only trained in terms of skill development, but coaches that care. And so one of the things moving forward is, how do we work with the community to identify women in their own communities that can be trained to work with the girls? So that's another kind of a future direction that we've been thinking about. So, like I said, as you're thinking about what the voices of the girls, those of you who know the positive youth development literature, they describe, without being prompted, every single dimension of an optimal context for positive youth development to occur. They want caring coaches. They want a safe space, psychological and physical safety. They want to develop positive relationships. They want the structure, not necessarily organized, but they want a structure, a set time to go every week where they know they can go and it's always available to them. They want to be taught skills. They're very anxious to learn. Chelsey's been over at the Brian Coyle Center, participating in their open physical activity hours, and they're just hungry to learn skills. They're eager. They're like those kids, the first to the gym, the last to leave. They want to learn and they want to have fun. So I think this is a really positive thing moving forward, to use this framework to help design some programming that works for them.
All right, so before I get to the future directions piece, I just want to say, really the key take-home from this study is that to promote active living, to foster positive youth development, and eventually, hopefully, by doing all of that, reducing health disparities, so that's a big claim. We'd like to see that happen. Listening to the voices of these girls in the study is really important, and we really need to listen and try to help create some of this culturally relevant physical activity program. As I talked to the girls, it undoubtedly came through that they really want to be active. They have the desire, they really want to be, but a lot of them can't because of barriers. And so they really do need our help and the help of their community to really make this a reality. Which does lead me then to the last piece, which is future directions. And I know we've hit on this a little bit throughout, but we know creating culturally relevant programming is needed. And so that's sort of our hope, is to take this research, to continue building trust in the East African community. So Dr. LaVoi alluded to this, that this project was several years in the making. And the whole first year of the project was truly just building relationships in the community. It was a really long, at times frustrating, but very rewarding process. And because of this, we have lots of mutual trust built up in the community, but we need to continue to do that, to let the community know we're not just there for research's sake. We're truly there to help. We're truly there to listen to their ideas and help create programming that's based on what they need, what they want, and not just what we think. So that's one of our major areas that we're still working on. That's why I go play basketball on Wednesday nights and learn how out of shape and how horrible at basketball I am, but it's lots of fun. So that's the first part. Second part then is with this trust build, to conduct community-based participatory action research. So this involves a lot of things, and I could stay here talking for a whole nother hour about this. But essentially we're working on forming a collaborative group of both academics here at the university and community leaders, community members in the East African community to come together to talk about ideas, and then also listen to the voices of those community members, to think about who other stakeholders beyond girls and beyond the girls in our study, maybe in the community, to conduct focus groups, listen to the voices of more girls, of parents, of other key community members, organizers, people who have a lot of things to say about programming and what will keep it sustainable. So next steps to focus groups, to take that information, come together, work with community members even more to create and then implement and evaluate programming. And so really the goal of this type of research is that it comes from the community. We help structure things along the way, but the voices of the community are really what come through and what's listened to. So that then, by doing all of this, the ultimate goal, probably several years down the road, right? And after grant funding, is to, hopefully, right, keep the fingers crossed, is to create sustainable, culturally relevant, community-derived physical activity programming for the girls right here in the Twin Cities area. And that's what we're looking forward to doing. So any comments you have would be great. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
like I said, we really just wanted to leave quite a bit of time to just get feedback, ideas, comments. So we'll just kind of open it up and yeah.
So did you apply for another grant as a follow-up to this grant?
We are working on
Oh, you're
that
working on
right
it?
now.
Do you have or maybe you don't, if you want to share, but what are you thinking of doing? Is it more of an intervention or more qualitative or?
It's so how we really see it is sort of a process of, or a combination of all of it. So starting with qualitative, doing the focus groups with a wider range of stakeholders, because the information we have is great, but it's a really small number, a specific group of girls. Yeah, so talking to a wider range of the community, taking that information then to work with sort of our group that we have, our collaborative group, to create the curriculum, create the programming, work with training coaches in the community, and then implement the program.
Okay.
And then evaluate the program along the way too. So that'll probably be
So it's
next.
kind of part of the whole.
Yeah.
That's our thought, but
Yeah.
you know, we're kind of open to design
Yeah.
and methodology right now. We're kind of in a fact-finding mode.
We are.
Well, that seems to lend itself to more kind of like real-world programming kinds of things rather than like a traditional randomized trial.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
So I think, you know, that going down those lines, developing the program and then evaluating it seems, I think, to make the most sense. But
Okay, awesome. That's good to hear because you think and then it's like, oh, maybe not.
Well,
So-
and when we presented this, or a version of this at the Active Living Research Conference, I don't know, a month ago, maybe
Yeah,
a couple
just-
weeks ago, a lot of the work out of that group, and if you don't know, Active Living Research is funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. They have this great conference where they bring in people from all kinds of disciplines, but very few people are doing qualitative participatory action research. So people were really excited by this for some reason because it was a different way to attack the same problem with a very unique population. So,
and that's what they want with the active living. I mean, they want the real world things, but I think that researchers are still stuck in the rut of like randomized trials, so they don't always do that. But I think this lends itself well to that.
yeah. So in terms of that, that's kind of what we're thinking, and applying through some funding for that piece to carry that out. And Chelsey might be here another 10 years executing it. But we're also looking for smaller programmatic and equipment kind of grants to keep the project going as we're kind of trying to get this up and running.
So what sports were they playing? You said the coaches would change. What sports were you having them be involved with?
So the girl that I talked to who said that quote, part of her school, they go out and they play soccer. So soccer specifically. But it's soccer where girls are in one field, boys are in the other field. It's not an all-girl environment by any means, but it was soccer that she was talking about. Yeah.
So my question about recruiting participants, and I had difficulty getting access to the girls. And do you have any future plans or future directions about how to get access to the girls who are completely inactive, the girls who are at home every single day taking care of the kids because they're the ones that need the most help? Do you have any idea how you're going to do that?
That's a really good question. No, it is a good question and a valid one, and one that we think about a lot. How do we do it? I think already we're taking the right step this time around by, when we did this study, we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into, and I'd walk in and all right, I'm going to get 40 East African girls to interview, So built up the trust, and we are working with the community members right from the get-go. I mean, we did some of that, but it was halfway into this. So this time around, working with the community members, and they know where those girls are, and I think will help us find access to those girls. So I think that's part of it, but I think that will be a huge challenge. So if you have ideas, Aaron, write them down.
I know. We have, and as part of this, it's not just us, it's Dr. Bicey, and she has a couple other people, and I know you've been engaged with this project. So, you know, moving forward, we really are trying to assemble a research team, because there's no way that one person alone can tackle this. It's a huge undertaking. We've been meeting with the community. There's a woman, Fatima, who's an amazing woman. She's in her early 20s. She commands the respect of the girls at the Brian Coyle Center. She's like a one-woman powerhouse. And so she will help us, I think, maybe get access to a different population of girls. And we may not. I don't know.
Well, you're talking about the Phillips neighborhood. Is that where you're getting all your data from? Where are these girls from?
The majority of them are from that area or nearby.
Okay, because I'm in the next neighborhood of Pottermore, and I see these kids sometimes at Pottermore. And I teach at De La Salle High School, and the whole thing about, I still get, do boys and girls have physical education together? And that's just like chalk on fingers on the chalkboard, because it's so important that we learn from each other. But I also know with a new immigrant community that you need to get them where they're at, give them the basic skills. But hopefully in the future, they will work together. So I think you're doing a great job doing that, and if I could lend my support, because I'm in the neighborhood, I have kids from the neighborhood, not Somalians don't go to Catholic schools for some reason. I don't know why, but I have kids that could, females that could help out, so we should talk after.
Yeah, definitely. That would be great. We're willing to take all the help we can get, so thank you.
Tommy and Nicole.
I think one of the neat things, one of the opportunities that comes out of their voices and what you've gotten them to tell you is that it seems like you can kind of circumnavigate some of the youth sports problems in starting anew to fit what these young ladies want. And so I guess my question is, you're seeing they don't want the hyperstructure. One of the things that I feel like we're losing, a lot of the stuff we read feels like we're losing, is kids don't go to the rink and just skate and play. They don't go to the playground and just grab some friends and go play pickup soccer, street soccer, or baseball, or whatever the game is. It seems like they want that. You mentioned they don't want the hyper organization, but they want some structure. What do you, just from what you got, I know you're only 12 to 18 people, or how many, a limited number of people you've spoken to, but what do you think it would look like, or based on what they tell you, is it just a regular meeting time? Is it an opportunity to play different sports? Is it what? Because that, giving them what they want, and that what they want doesn't equal this hyper-organized, suburbanized youth sport model that we have. It could go a long way, not just for them, but for everybody, in telling us what's good for kids to be participating in. Any ideas of what that would look like?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. It's a huge question. So my answer right now, without really being able to think about it, would be a meeting time, a standard meeting time. From what I'm seeing on Wednesday nights, it is the ability to have some training, so have a coach that's there teaching skills, but then allows the girls just to play. Has somebody there who supervises, so if girls are, crashing into each other and there's a safety issue, is there to kind of tame it down a bit. But it doesn't say a whole lot, so maybe, half hour of skills, hour of just letting them play, let them do what it is they want to do. If it's basketball, let them have a game, they work things out, jump in if there's an issue. That's more how I see it. I do also see a wider range of activities, because in talking to the girls, they mention a wide array of things that they really want to do, but things like swimming they can't do, so it's providing access to those facilities where they can just have fun and explore different types of activity.
And I was just talking with Dr. Keel, because she's got a community action research project going with RBI, with baseball and softball in St. Paul and the urban core there. And we were, because, we're all so busy, I'm like, you're doing what? And she's like, you're doing what? And so then we're like, wow, we're really doing some similar things. So we found this out at Poster Day over at McNamara. We're right down the hall from one another. And so I was just talking with her in the hallway, and she's like, you know, here's RBI, and they have a softball component. It's free. They provide coach training. So here's another program. And I think your comment's valid, Tommy, is that they want to be active, but they haven't had the access and exposure. So I don't even think they know what they want to do in some respects because they haven't been exposed. So one of the things we've talked about, I mean, they'll tell us what they want, but it's just to expose them. Kind of like a summer sport camp model, right? Where it's like a week of basketball, a week of soccer, a week of volleyball, you know, just to, and then from there they can go off because they have the basics. So that's one idea we've been kicking around.
Yeah, definitely. And another piece of that we've thrown around a little bit is whether or not we want to add a really small nutrition component to it. So having it be about physical activity, letting the girls have fun, be active, but also maybe a 10-minute lesson every day, interactive lesson about the importance of, you know, drinking water, eating fruits and vegetables, things like that. Because we do, as Dr. LaVoi mentioned, know, not for research because not much research has been done, but anecdotally, talking to doctors, etc., that there is a major health concern with the girls and women in this community and rising rates of obesity, etc. So having that component, I think, could also be beneficial. And just from going Wednesday nights, it's great, the girls are active, they're running around, they're having fun, but then they're out to the vending machine every 2 minutes, and instead of drinking water, they're there for 3 hours, they'll be drinking pop. So it's things like this, too, that I think we can add in, make it fun for the girls, but educational, that I see maybe being a piece, if they're up for it. But it would have to be, I mean, come from the girls, do they want this or not? So.
And also, I mean, and, you know, Dr. Lewis is sitting right here. This
Yeah.
is your area. So, again, bringing people onto the team that can help us. I mean, this is not, nutrition is not our area, but it's a very important piece. So, you know, I'm looking at you.
Water, that's what it's about.
Thul?
I was going back to what you were talking about earlier about access. And you can just talk briefly. We had talked when you were going through this process early on. I was kind of wondering, you mentioned some of the barriers to access. What were some of those barriers, and how did you handle those barriers?
Access to finding the
To
girls.
the participants, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And just embarking on, you know, opening that dialogue, and then, you know, you said, oh, I'll just go in and get 40 East African girls. Well, you know, what are some of the things that prevented that from just happening?
Well, I think, there's a lot, and I could talk for a long time. The number one thing I think was trust. So this community, like a lot of underserved communities, and particularly immigrant communities, is very hesitant of researchers and academics in particular, and rightfully so in a lot of ways, because they have been mistreated at times by some researchers. So I think that was a big piece of it, and so until that trust was built, that I wasn't just coming along just to talk to their girls, to get information, to write a paper and then leave, was really what it took. And that took a lot of convincing, both meeting with community members, and not just once, sometimes time and time again. I worked out, I volunteered with FOLK, which is Family, Opportunity Living Collaboration, I hope I got that right, and would work out with Somali elders. So in the hopes that they would value this project and then disseminate it throughout the community. A lot of different aspects like that, but it really came down to building trust, and that took about a year. I mean, still is ongoing. It's not, fully developed. So.
And I think that's one of the biggest that's one of the biggest things I think that we learned with this method is, you know, it's not like, here's your survey, fill it out, we're out of here. I mean, it's very time consuming. And Chelsey, bless her heart, was very persistent in getting these girls. I mean, she's being modest. She was, working out at all hours of the evenings with Somali elders and, you know, working with the schools to get access to girls and showing up for practices. And so it was a lot of work.
Have you thought about working with the college population too as well? In terms of, I mean, if you want to look at access, and then you've got the rec center to work with too, because they can go there as well. But.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great point. And we, so when we first did this project, I talked to the Somali Student Association a little bit and started to build that relationship, just very small. But we have talked about working with members of that female members of that association, not only to come on to a collaborative team to help with this project, but because the rec center is there to help develop something for them. We've also checked into the rec center for use with younger girls as well. We didn't know if it was a possibility because of insurance, but it is a possibility.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, which is great news.
And it's very cost effective.
Yeah.
So you can pay the rec center to
Like $20
Yeah.
for a use of those rooms in the corners. I don't know, way back in the corner with just one small window. It's an old racquetball or squash court where you could have a screen. You could put the girls in there, or the pool down and cook where it's a lot more private. So we're looking into that because I think one of our bigger goals is to create safe space here because it's pretty much geographically in proximity to the neighborhood. To get them here to use the great space we have, because the space at Brian Coyle where they have is really crowded, it's not high quality, etc.
And it's tough at Brian Coyle because we're there on Wednesday nights, and for 3 hours we're there. Boys are banging on the door. Boys are trying to sneak in. It's their space, and they're not happy that for 3 hours the girls have this space. So I think that is a major issue that could be eliminated by using this space. And then, as Dr. LaVoi is saying, this space we've got the pool, we've got an area they can lift weights if they want. Plus, we have the gym where they can dance, play games, do whatever it is. So we've got everything in one, kind of like a one-shop stop here. So.
Yeah, the natatorium is sometimes open, and the cook hall pool is not open, so you would think we can't do the natatorium.
Right, yeah.
But I mean, I know there's times the cook hall is not being used anyway.
So one of the things that stood out to me is how similar a lot of the barriers and facilitators are for these girls and the general population, but also, I mean, obviously the different need for this female-only space, but the difference in the family support idea, I mean, a need for female-only space, the solution seems to be create that space. What is the solution to this lack of family support? Because that's a really culturally sensitive issue, and how do you see getting over that?
Well, I think a couple things. First of all, I think by creating a female-only space helps with that issue, because I think right now the biggest issue with parents is they're hesitant to let their girls go run around outside where boys are going to be right there. So if you have this guaranteed female-only facility where no man will walk in, I think that helps the parents be a little bit less sort of anxious about letting their girls be in that space, particularly if that space is run by and the sports are being taught by a member of their own community. I think that's really what it takes there, along with, like Dr. LaVoi mentioned earlier, educating the parents about the importance of physical activity. I think definitely some parents understand, but I think a combination of the importance of physical activity, education, along with the health piece, along with there's a space, it's totally safe. I think that those can come together pretty nicely. But it will be hard.
Yeah, and we have also thought, which is, another, an add-on, is to do a mother-daughter program. So now you've got the parents with the girls, so you're taking away that kind of parental approval barrier because the mom's there. Now you're going to get in a 2-for-1. But we'll write that grant too, maybe. Stay tuned.
You use the term culturally relevant programming. I'm wondering if in these populations programming is culturally relevant.
What do you mean by that? Yeah.
The structure that comes with programs that have a name and a structure and so on, is that going to achieve the objectives that you set out to achieve?
I think that's a good question and something perhaps we will need to add to our future focus groups. But what I think the girls are saying, though they don't use the words like, programming, things like that, is that they are saying that they want a place, a consistent place that's there on a weekly basis with these certain trainers there, with people there that create this safe space, which essentially is programming, a space where they can be active. And it has elements there's training, right? There's free play, things like that. So I think they allude to that without, using words like programming. That programming is important to us. They talk about different elements of programming that are important then.
Yeah, and the culturally relevant term, that's our term. We didn't say, okay, now tell us what you think is culturally relevant programming. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. But we wanted them to describe that by asking other kinds of questions that would have them flush that out for us. But one of the things moving forward is we need to find out if indeed what our understanding of this is indeed culturally relevant.
Well, one of the big steps is just being able to wear shorts and a t-shirt and nothing on your head. I mean,
Right.
That's the first step, I think, to making it culturally relevant, which is then what you're talking about, space.
Exactly.
But there might be, you're right, there might be other issues in terms of types of activities or those things that might be, I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. But that is piece number one.
Have they expressed any fear, for lack of a better term, of, okay, if we have space and we start to do things that move us, what some of the elders might think is away from our culture, and we start doing these things, have they expressed any kind of fear that you people are going to come here, and even though we trust you, maybe at some level you might want us to all of a sudden go to PE class with the boys eventually, that you're working toward an assimilation process that we don't want to be a part of. Have they been clear about the buck stops here? We'll take off the headwear and we'll wear shorts or a swimming suit, but we're not gonna. This isn't gonna be.
Good question.
That is a great question, and I think that the girls have been relatively clear in that how they talk about it is, we want to be active, we want to do these things are important to us, but we want to do it in a way that allows us not to be around men if we're going to take our clothes, our hijab, etc. So in that respect, I think that they do, but it's not a clear-cut line, so I think that's important, and that perhaps is part of the piece that we need to discuss with community members, because maybe that's in the back of parents' heads as well, which is part of the issue with convincing parents.
I would think, as far as trust is concerned, being able to communicate to them that, we're respectful of your religion, we're respectful of the way your religious culture gets injected into Americanization and vice versa. We don't want. This is not our goal.
Right.
Well, and I think what we're bumping up to a lot is the sense that any immigrant population goes through in terms of acculturation and assimilation, right? So we're kind of getting into that in a way that we have to be sensitive to, but not ignore. And it's just with the Hmong population or Hispanic or, with any, there's different challenges that go along with that. And our goal is certainly not to be like, this is how we're going to do this. That would be a disaster.
Yeah, but I think that's a valid point and something that we will need to speak to more clearly with the community. Yeah.
I wonder if a way to kind of circumvent that issue is when you do future research with stakeholders, include both girls and stakeholders in the community in different generations, so that they're allowed to speak their fears about kind of Americanizing their children as their children are being socialized through going through public schools or whatnot. I mean, the girls may have completely different ideas of what they want, and their parents may have different ideas. And I think getting them together for future research would help create kind of a compromise.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, completely agreed. And that's where the community-based participatory action research and our focus groups totally, right now, and I'm sure I'll be talking to you a lot more, Erin, how we do conceptualize it, our stakeholders, not only girls, but their parents, community members, both men and women, because there needs to be buy-in on both levels in this community. And key organizers, so wide range of stakeholders, because you're completely right. That needs to be discussed with everyone in order for a program to remain sustainable in that community. Yeah.
Well, we'll wrap up a little early unless you have any more questions. We have a copy of the poster, a little handout here with some more quotes. If you would like a copy, you certainly can. That kind of really summarizes what we just talked about. And so, obviously, stay tuned. This is like stage one, many more to come. So thanks for coming today.